buy these nuts from Stu Mac at a convenience, and I feel like out of all the bone that I've tried, their bone is really consistent, so I just buy it from them. They're rough shaped, so this is a Martin blank, and this is actually going on an Epiphone. I also buy Gibson and Fender blanks because they're closer to the nut slot that, for each individual manufacturer. But the Martin is closer to this Epiphone than the Gibson. The Gibson is too narrow. So this is still too fat, and I have to make it more narrow. So I'm gonna start sanding it to get it closer to the slot. And one thing that I do is I get it flat on the bottom in parallel, and then once I find that flatness, I bevel the top so I know which is the bottom and which is the top. Two special pencils that I use is a carpenter's pencil that is just sanded flat in half, and this will rest on the frets and it'll draw an exact line where I want the string slot to end. And then I also take a mechanical pencil and just put it on some sandpaper and file it flat so it's a really sharp point. Still a little proud on the ends, so I need to very carefully sand until it's flush. So now I'm putting a little mark to get the contour that I want. So this is the top. This is where I want the rounded part to go to. So the nut is slotted now. The slots go to the bottom of the pencil line. The slots are also kind of deep, so we need to deep in the sense that we need to take some of the top of this bone off. So you only want half of the string to show above the top of the nut. If it's deeper than that, you can create binding issues. You just need the nut to hold the string and let it slide freely in the nut. So down here on the plain strings, they'll sit a little bit deeper because it's kind of hard to only have them sitting halfway in. But definitely the wound strings, only half of the string showing.
All right, let's show what the string break angle should be. Okay, so we got the headstock. All right, we're doing a Les Paul, right? So we got the headstock and we got the nut. exaggerated nut. And here's the fretboard. And the bridge is down here, right? So when the string goes through, you want it to follow the curvature of the headstock. So the string goes up, and then through the nut, and then back off. So what does that look like blown up? Okay, what does this look like blown up? So here's the nut. You want the slot to go with the trajectory of the neck. So the slot should be, the string is going down, here's the string, and it's going to go up. So the slot should follow that. But the important part is that there's no flat part, and it carries the string all the way through the nut. You might get a little lift off here at the bottom where there might be a gap, but this should be nice and uniform and touching the string everywhere. Now what you don't want is, here's the nut, you don't want a big flat area and then the string drop off. So you don't want the string to go like this and then go down towards the headstock, because the intonation point will no longer be on the front. It will be wherever the highest point of this land is. So it could be here, and it could be here, and it'll screw up your whole intonation. So you need the takeoff point to be here, and it to follow the natural progression of the string towards the tuners. So that's the tuner, and the string's coming up. You need that slot to go like that.
Okay, so once the nut is roughed in and I got all the slots, it's not perfect, so it will get perfect during the setup. So I just double check that the fit is perfect. If the fit is not perfect, I either need to fix it or sometimes I need to cut a new nut. The more you do it, the less mistakes you make, and you don't have to redo what you did. But when you're starting out, a lot of times you'll have to redo nuts, so don't get discouraged. So this is what it looks like, and now I'm gonna glue it in. Get your relief where you need it to be, and then adjust the action at the nut. I'm going to press down at the second fret, and then I'm going to look to see the gap between the top of the first fret and the bottom of the string that I'm. Action is different for everybody. A general rule of thumb is that you should get the action at the nut just so there is no gap between the top of the fret and the bottom of the string. So you want it to just be barely resting on the top of that fret. That's a general rule of thumb. When you're starting out to make nuts, you should probably leave a little bit more room so you can fine tune it later until you get the hang of things. And then you can take measurements, and typical measurements are somewhere around 20 thousandths for the low E and around 10 to 12 thousandths on the high E. So what I do is set the outside strings to the action that I want, and then I take my radius gauge and then match all the heights so that it matches the radius.
Some people slot the nut on an angle towards the tuner. So the theory is that it doesn't have the potential to get bound in the nut as easy if you slot it on an angle. And I have done that. I've never noticed a difference. The slotting it straight through the nut is easier, more accurate to do when you're slotting the nut, so that's the way that I choose to do it. The other thing is, why does it matter where it bends? So it could either bend here, the pivot point could be here at the front of the nut, or the pivot point could be here at the back of the nut. And I choose to have it here at the back of the nut. That way, the nut is always a little bit more open on the back side than on the front end, because the tolerances are real tight on the front end of the nut because of the intonation and carrying the string and decreasing vibrations and things like that. So on the back side of the nut, the way it comes off the nut, it just allows it to be a little bit more open. So I feel like it's easier to slot it this way, and I also think that it will slide through the nut better. I know people disagree with me, and they think sliding it on an angle through the nut is better, but that's okay. We can disagree. My nuts stay in tune, and intonation is on point, so that's the main thing.
See you guys next week. Probably going to do an amp project next week with some time lapse and stuff. If you guys need anything, shoot me a message.